The damp, suffocating air of the basement beneath Prescott University's oldest dormitory smelled like mold and misplaced hope. It was a far cry from the glittering, sun-drenched quads where the elite frat boys roamed, but it was perfect for what I needed. I leaned against the chipped brick wall, adjusting the silver hoop piercing in my left ear. My reflection in the cracked mirror across the room still surprised me sometimes. Gone was the mousy, thick glass scholarship kid swallowed by oversized hoodies. Staring back at me was a stranger with icy platinum blonde hair, a geometric tattoo crawling up his inner wrist, and eyes that no longer looked at the ground. I had burned the old Julian Pierce to ashes the day Caleb Sterling shattered my heart in front of the entire graduating class. But ashes make excellent fertilizer. I scanned the small circle of mismatched folding chairs. 7 people sat their heads bowed, nursing cold cups of cheap coffee. We called ourselves the Prescott Healing Circle on the official campus registry, but everyone in this damp room knew the real name, the victims of Caleb Sterling. It had been 3 months since the kiss that was supposed to mean forever turned out to be a cruel frat house dare. 3 months since the almighty enigma of Prescott had discarded me like a broken toy. I had created this group ostensibly to heal, but deep down, it was a monument to my own bitterness. I wanted to see the wreckage he left behind. I wanted to be the king of his broken toys. To play the part of the untouchable bad boy, I had drenched myself in a harsh, synthetic cologne, cheap vape smoke, and heavy leather. It was a suffocating shield designed to completely mask my natural omega scent. No one here would ever catch the soft, vulnerable notes of jasmine and old books that Caleb had once buried his face in. I cleared my throat. Stepping into the center of the circle, "Welcome," I started, keeping my tone smooth and detached. "You're here because you survived him. You're here because..." The heavy iron door at the top of the basement stairs groaned open, cutting me off. Heavy footsteps echoed down the concrete steps. Every head in the circle turned. A tall, broad-shouldered figure stepped into the dim light. He was drowning in an oversized, faded gray hoodie. The hood pulled up so far it practically covered his forehead. A pair of ridiculously large, dark sunglasses hid the rest of his face, which was absurd considering the only light in the room came from a flickering fluorescent bulb. He stood frozen at the edge of our circle, shifting his weight awkwardly. But it wasn't his terrible disguise that made my breath catch in my throat. It was the scent. It was faint, desperately suppressed by what must have been layers of scent blockers. But my omega instincts flared violently, recognizing it in a heartbeat. Deep, intoxicating cedar mixed with the dangerous, electric warmth of sunflowers. The scent of the predator who had ruined me. Caleb Sterling was standing in my basement. My heart hammered violently against my ribs, a chaotic mix of primal terror and an agonizing, stupid rush of joy. What was he doing here? The untouchable enigma, the heir to the Sterling Empire, dressed like a fugitive in the very club dedicated to hating his guts. Is this the support group? His voice was rough, pitched artificially high to disguise that low, lethal baritone that used to whisper my name in the dark. A girl named Sarah nodded sympathetically. "Yes, come in. You're safe here." Safe? I almost laughed out loud. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. He took a seat in the empty metal folding chair right across from me. He kept his head down, the oversized hood shadowing whatever the sunglasses didn't cover. "What's your name, new friend?" I asked, forcing my voice to remain steady, though my blood was roaring in my ears. I crossed my arms, making sure the sleeve of my tight black shirt rode up just enough to flash my tattoo. Let him look at the monster he created. He flinched slightly at my voice. His head tilted up, and even through the dark lenses, I could feel the weight of his stare burning into me. He took in the platinum hair, the piercing, the tight clothes. I saw his Adam's apple bob as he swallowed hard. "Connor," he mumbled, his voice cracking slightly. "My name is Connor. I'm an alpha." But he paused, taking a shaky breath that deserved a damn Oscar. I was destroyed by Caleb Sterling. The room let out a collective, sympathetic sigh, but inside, my mind was spinning at light speed. His arrogance had brought him here, thinking he could infiltrate my space, perhaps to mock me, or perhaps to win me back under a ridiculous disguise. The sheer, pathetic desperation of it all crushed his almighty enigma aura into dust. He thought I didn't know. He thought I was still the naive, short-sighted scholarship kid he could manipulate with a fake name and a hoodie. A dark, thrilling sense of power unfurled in my chest. If he wanted to play a game, I would give him a masterpiece. I uncrossed my arms and walked slowly across the circle. I stopped right in front of him. I could see the faint trembling of his large hands resting on his knees. I knelt down, bringing my face level with his, up close. I could see the sharp line of his jaw, the one I used to trace with my fingertips. I reached out and gently laid my hands over his trembling ones. They were so warm. A jolt of electricity shot up my arms, but I kept my face an absolute mask of tender pity. "Connor," I whispered, making sure my voice trembled just perfectly, dripping with fake empathy. "I know exactly how much he hurts people. I know the monster Caleb Sterling is. But you're not alone anymore." I squeezed his hands, looking deep into his ridiculous sunglasses, fighting back the wicked smirk threatening to break across my lips. "I promise you," I vowed softly, leaning in just close enough that my harsh synthetic cologne would assault his senses. "I will help you get over him. We are going to heal you." Underneath my hands, the great Caleb Sterling shuddered. The trap had been set, and the predator had just walked straight into the cage, locking the door behind him. Winter in Boston was unforgiving, but watching Caleb Sterling suffer in it brought a unique, wicked warmth to my chest. "Excuse me. Have you been personally victimized by Caleb Sterling? Please take a flyer." I sat on a wooden bench at the edge of the Prescott Quad, bundled in a sleek black trench coat, sipping a steaming cup of coffee. 10 yards away, Connor was shivering in his oversized gray hoodie, violently pink flyers clutched in his gloved hands. The flyers, which I had personally designed, featured a poorly photoshopped image of Caleb with devil horns and the bold headline, "Caleb Sterling is a heartless bastard. Join the healing circle." Watching the almighty Enigma hand out propaganda against himself to confused freshmen was a level of petty I didn't know I possessed, but God, it felt good. A group of sorority girls walked past, giggling as Connor awkwardly shoved a neon pink paper into their hands. He looked miserable. Every time the winter wind whipped past, I could see his broad shoulders tense. He was a Sterling. He belonged in heated luxury cars and penthouse suites, not standing in ankle-deep slush playing the role of his own victim. Yet he stayed. He had been standing there for 2 hours just because I told him it was a crucial step in reclaiming his power. I took a slow sip of my coffee, pulling my collar up. I had intentionally drenched myself in that harsh, synthetic cologne again this morning, burnt vape smoke and sharp leather. Whenever Connor came near me, I saw his nose twitch beneath those ridiculous sunglasses. I knew exactly what he was looking for. He was searching for the soft, calming scent of jasmine and old books that used to spill from my omega glands when he kissed me. "Keep looking, Caleb," I thought viciously. "That boy is dead." Later that evening, back in the damp basement for our weekly meeting, I decided to push the knife in a little deeper. "Connor," I called out, my voice cutting through the quiet chatter of the group. "Did you finish the assignment?" He stiffened in his metal folding chair. "Yes, Julian." "Good. Please stand up and read it to the group." 5,000 words on why Caleb Sterling is the worst thing to ever happen to Prescott University. A few group members winced in sympathy, but I kept my face utterly blank. Connor stood up slowly, pulling a crumpled stack of papers from his pocket. His hands were shaking again. He cleared his throat, adjusting his dark glasses. "Caleb Sterling," he began, his voice raspy and forced, "is an arrogant, blind fool." He read through pages of insults I had expected, calling Caleb a narcissist, a manipulative jerk, a spoiled rich kid. I sat back, enjoying the show. But somewhere around page 3 his fake, high-pitched Connor voice began to slip. The low, gravelly baritone of the real Caleb bled through, echoing off the concrete walls. "He is a coward," Caleb read, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the paper. "He hides behind his family's money and his frat brother's dares because he is terrified of anything real." When someone finally looked at him and saw the man he could be, not just the enigma everyone worshipped, he panicked. He destroyed the best thing that ever happened to him just to prove he couldn't be hurt. He is a pathetic, lonely coward. The basement went dead silent. My breath hitched. My fingernails dug into the palms of my hands until they ached. I stared at the hooded figure, my heart violently slamming against my ribs. "It's an act," I screamed at myself. "He's manipulating you again. Don't fall for it." But the bleeding regret in his voice felt too heavy to be a lie. Before I could unravel completely, he sat back down, folding the paper. That's all I have." I swallowed the lump in my throat, forcing a cool, detached smile. "Very insightful, Connor. Good progress." The tension carried over into the weekend. As part of our social reintegration, I forced the group to go to the Crypt, a notoriously loud, sweaty underground bar off campus. The bass thumped so hard it rattled my teeth. Neon strobe lights sliced through the thick haze of alcohol and sweat. I was leaning against the sticky bar, waiting for the bartender, when a cup slid into my hand. I looked up. Connor was standing right beside me, holding a cardboard tray. "Black Americano, 2 sugars," he muttered, close to my ear so I could hear him over the music. I froze. It was exactly how I took my coffee. During those late-night study sessions in the library, Caleb used to bring me this exact order. "How did you know?" I asked, my voice dangerously tight, eyes narrowing at him. He panicked visibly, his broad chest rising in a sharp breath. I noticed you drinking it at the quad the other day." "Lucky guess." Liar. Before I could push him onto drunk, massive alpha from a rival frat stumbled backward, crashing heavily into me. The impact knocked the breath out of my lungs, sending me stumbling toward the edge of the bar. I didn't even have time to brace myself before a hand shot out, wrapping around my waist with terrifying speed and strength. Connor yanked me against his chest, shielding me entirely from the stumbling crowd. His oversized hoodie enveloped me, and for a split second, the facade completely shattered. In his fury at the drunk alpha, Caleb lost control of his scent blockers. A massive, overwhelming wave of dark cedar and electric sunflowers crashed over me. It bypassed my synthetic cologne, bypassed my logic, and struck straight at my biology. My omega instincts flared with violent, undeniable recognition. My knees went weak. The heat of his body, the iron grip of his arm around my waist, the scent that haunted my dreams, it was all too much. I looked up, and through the gap between his hood and sunglasses, I saw his eyes. Not Connor's timid gaze, but Caleb's dark, possessive glare, burning with a terrifying intensity. I shoved him away, gasping for air as if I had been drowning. "I'm fine," I snapped, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. I turned and practically fled toward the bathroom, the pulsing bass mirroring the frantic beating of my heart. I locked myself in a stall, pressing my burning forehead against the cool metal door. The game was getting out of hand. If I stayed in his arms for one more second, I would have forgiven him for everything. I couldn't let that happen. It was time to rip the mask off. It was time to pull the trigger. The Massachusetts wilderness in late winter was a brutal, unforgiving shade of gray. The air was sharp enough to bite your lungs, and a thick, creeping fog clung to the damp earth of the Blackwood State Park. It was the perfect, miserable setting for the Prescott Healing Circle's weekend retreat. I had pitched the idea to the group as a wilderness bonding experience to shed our past traumas. In reality, it was the grand stage I had carefully constructed for my final act. After the incident at the crypt, where Caleb's intoxicating cedar scent had nearly brought me to my knees, I knew I couldn't drag this out much longer. Playing with fire was fun until you started remembering how much you loved the burn. It was time to pull the trigger. On Saturday afternoon, I led the group on a hike along the jagged perimeter of the Widow's Ridge. The trail was notoriously slippery, slick with melting ice and dead leaves, bordered by a steep, rocky incline that dropped 20 feet into a muddy ravine. I made sure to linger at the back of the pack. And just as I anticipated, Connor hung back with me. He marched in silence, broad shoulders hunched against the biting wind, his ridiculous sunglasses practically glued to his face despite the heavy fog. "Careful, Julian," his raspy, disguised voice broke the quiet between us. "The ground is giving way near the edge." "I'm fine, Connor," I replied coldly, stepping even closer to the precipice. I glanced down. The drop wasn't lethal, but it would hurt like hell. Perfect. I waited until the rest of the group had rounded a bend up ahead, their chatter fading into the dense pine trees. It was just the two of us now. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the impact, and deliberately planted my expensive leather boot onto a patch of black ice disguised by wet pine needles. I didn't have to fake the sharp gasp that tore from my throat as my footing vanished. Gravity seized me with terrifying speed. "Julian!" The scream wasn't Connor's timid rasp. It was Caleb, raw guttural, and dripping with absolute terror. I started to slide backward toward the ravine, the jagged rocks scraping against my jacket. But before I could even process the fall, a massive weight slammed into the dirt beside me. A hand clamped around my wrist like a steel vise, jarring my shoulder socket. Caleb had thrown his entire body toward the edge, digging his boots into the mud to anchor us both. With a primal grunt of exertion, he yanked me upwards, hauling my weight over the ledge as if I were nothing but a rag doll. We collapsed onto the wet trail in a tangle of limbs, my chest heaving, adrenaline flooding my veins. For a second, I was genuinely paralyzed by the shock of the fall. Caleb was hovering over me, his large hands frantically checking my face, my arms, my shoulders. "Are you hurt, Julian? Look at me. Are you hurt?" The disguise was completely forgotten. He was using his real voice, that deep, commanding baritone that used to make my omega instincts purr. His panic was so loud, so violently sincere, that for a fraction of a second, The calculating mastermind inside me faltered. But then, I heard the crunch of footsteps running back toward us. The group had heard the shout. I looked up at the man pinning me to the earth. During his desperate dive, the branch of a low-hanging pine had snagged the thick fabric of his gray hoodie, ripping the hood violently back. The impact with the ground had knocked the oversized sunglasses off his face, sending them skittering and shattering against a rock. The mask was gone. His sharp jawline, his disheveled dark hair, those piercing, stormy eyes that used to look right through me, they were all bare under the pale winter light. "Oh my God," Sarah's voice trembled from the edge of the trail. Caleb froze. He slowly turned his head to see the 6 members of the healing circle standing a few feet away. Their faces drained of color, staring at him as if they had just seen a ghost. "Caleb," one of the freshmen whispered, his voice cracking with sheer disbelief. "Caleb Sterling." The silence that followed was suffocating. I could feel the violent shudder that wrecked Caleb's body. The mighty enigma of Prescott University had been caught red-handed, kneeling in the mud, pretending to be a broken victim. It was my cue. I scrambled backward, crawling away from him through the wet dirt, channeling every ounce of the devastated, broken boy I had buried inside me. I widened my eyes, letting my breathing turn shallow and panicked. "You," I choked out, pointing a trembling finger at him. "It's you. You've been him this whole time." "Julian, please," Caleb pleaded, holding his dirt-stained hands out toward me. The arrogance was completely gone, replaced by a desperate, bleeding panic. "I can explain. I just needed to be near you. I just wanted to." "Don't touch me," I screamed, scrambling to my feet and hiding behind Sarah. "You sick bastard. Wasn't destroying me in front of the whole school enough? You had to infiltrate a support group just to humiliate us again. To laugh at us." "No, that's not why I'm here," Caleb yelled, scrambling to his feet, his eyes locked desperately on mine. "Julian, I swear to God, I never laughed. I've been dying without you." But the group had already turned into a wall of hostility. Sarah shoved him back. The others began shouting, hurling insults, calling him a sociopath, a monster. I stood behind them, my face buried in my hands, seemingly weeping. But behind my fingers, my lips twitched into a cold, victorious smile. "Checkmate, Sterling. We are leaving," I announced, my voice trembling with perfectly calibrated heartbreak. "Don't you ever come near any of us again." We walked away, leaving the heir to the Sterling Empire standing alone in the freezing mud, his disguise in ruins, surrounded by the echoes of our hatred. I didn't look back, but the victory tasted strangely like ashes. Later that night, back at the Prescott dorms, a brutal sleet storm descended on Boston. The wind howled against the old brick buildings. I stood in my darkened room, a glass of bourbon in my hand, staring out the frost-covered window. 3 stories down, illuminated only by a flickering street lamp, stood a figure in a ruined gray hoodie. Caleb was standing in the freezing sleet, his broad shoulders soaked, looking straight up at my window. He didn't knock. He didn't call. He just stood there, taking the punishment of the storm as if he believed he deserved it. I pressed my fingertips against the cold glass, right where his face was in the distance. My chest tightened painfully, a phantom ache blooming where his hands had gripped me to save my life. "Let him freeze," my mind ordered. "He caught you," my treacherous heart whispered. I turned away from the window and closed the blinds, plunging my room into total darkness. The mask had fallen, but the real game was only just beginning. The storm didn't break until the next evening. By the time the sleet finally stopped hammering against the brick walls of the Prescott dorms, I felt like I was crawling out of my own skin. I had won. The almighty Caleb Sterling had been humiliated, exposed, and cast out. My revenge was complete. So why did it feel like I was the one suffocating? I tossed my leather jacket onto the armchair and walked over to my desk. My laptop was still open, the screen glowing faintly in the dim room. I had been writing in my encrypted digital journal, a habit I'd kept since I was a lonely freshman. It was the only place where the ruthless, platinum-haired Julian didn't exist, and the broken, hopelessly in love Omega could breathe. I rubbed my tired eyes, leaving the laptop open, and headed toward the small en-suite bathroom to wash the synthetic cologne off my skin. The hot water felt like a harsh reprimand against my tense muscles. But as I stood under the spray, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. Thump. It was a heavy, dull sound coming from my bedroom, followed by the faint rattle of the fire escape window being pushed open. My heart seized. I shut off the water instantly, grabbing a towel and wrapping it around my waist. I crept toward the bathroom door, my Omega instinct screaming danger. Someone was in my room. I pushed the door open just a fraction. Standing in the center of my room, dripping wet and breathing heavily, was Caleb. He looked terrible. The arrogant enigma was gone. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, and his eyes were wild, bordered by dark circles of exhaustion. He had actually climbed the 3 stories up the icy fire escape. "Julian," he called out, his voice hoarse. Taking a step toward the bathroom, "Julian, please. I saw your light on. I just need 5 minutes." "Get out," I shouted, stepping out of the bathroom, gripping the door frame so hard my knuckles turned white. "Are you insane? I'll call campus security." "Call them," he fired back, stepping closer, his cedar scent filling the room, thick with desperation. "Let them arrest me. I don't care. I'm not leaving until you listen to me." He was closing the distance between us, his massive frame dominating the small room. I backed up, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. I needed a weapon, anything to keep him away. I spun around, reaching blindly toward my desk. My hand hit the edge of my open laptop. Before I could catch it, the laptop slid off the smooth wood and crashed onto the floor right at Caleb's feet. The screen flickered but didn't die. Caleb froze, looking down at the glowing screen. I saw his body stiffen. "Don't look at that," I lunged forward, but he was faster. He reached down and picked up the laptop. I stopped dead in my tracks. The breath left my lungs in a painful rush. He was staring at the screen. The encrypted journal was wide open, specifically on the entry I had been writing an hour ago. The entry detailing the entire truth about the graduation dare. Caleb's eyes darted across the screen, reading the words I had poured my agonizing soul into. The plan worked perfectly. I hacked Blake's phone, manipulated the group chat, and planted the seed for the dare. I made sure Caleb would have to approach me. I pulled the strings of the almighty enigma just so he would look at me. And he kissed me. He kissed me in front of everyone, exactly like I calculated, but God, why does my heart hurt like it's dying? I tricked him, but I actually fell in love with him. And now I've ruined it all. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the sound of the wind outside. I watched the realization hit Caleb like a physical blow. His jaw went slack. The desperate, pleading look in his eyes vanished, replaced by a storm of pure, unadulterated shock. He read the entry again, and then he slowly lifted his head to look at me. I braced myself for the explosion. I waited for the rage, the disgust, the fury of an alpha realizing he had been played like a fiddle by a supposedly weak omega. I was ready to be yelled at. I was ready for him to tear me apart. But Caleb didn't yell. Instead, a terrifying, slow smile spread across his face. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator realizing his prey had fangs of its own. He let out a low, breathless laugh that sent a shiver straight down my spine. "You," he whispered, his eyes dark and burning with an intensity that made my knees weak. "It was you. The whole time, the dare. It was your idea." "Caleb," I stammered, the platinum-haired bad boy facade crumbling instantly. I took a step back, suddenly feeling very exposed in just a towel. He tossed the laptop onto the bed and closed the distance between us in 2 long strides. He didn't touch me, but he trapped me against the wall with his sheer presence, his body heat radiating against my damp skin. "You hacked Blake's phone," he said, his voice dropping to a gravelly, dangerous whisper. "You manipulated my entire inner circle just to get me to notice you." "I was stupid," I whispered back, my voice trembling. "I was a nobody, and you were." "I was a pawn," he interrupted, but there was no anger in his voice. There was, He leaned in, his nose inches from mine, his scent wrapping around me like a heavy blanket. "You played me, Julian. You played the entire campus." He reached out, his long fingers gently hooking under my chin, forcing me to look into his stormy eyes. "I spent the last 3 months hating myself for breaking a fragile, innocent boy," he murmured, his thumb brushing against my bottom lip. "But you were never innocent, were you? You're a monster, just like me." My breath hitched. The air between us was crackling with a sudden, violent electricity. The dynamic had shifted entirely. I wasn't the victim anymore, and he wasn't the oppressor. We were 2 liars staring at each other's true faces. "What are you going to do?" I breathed out, my heart hammering wildly. Caleb's smile turned wicked, his eyes dropping to my lips before locking onto mine again. "I'm going to make you pay for the last 3 months, Pierce," he whispered against my mouth. "Game on." He stepped back, the intense heat suddenly vanishing. He turned and walked back toward the fire escape window. Swinging his leg over the sill, he paused, looking back at me with a smirk that promised absolute chaos. "See you around, Julian." He disappeared into the night, leaving me standing against the wall shivering, completely terrified. and more alive than I had felt in months. The campus of Prescott University had always been a chessboard, but for the past 3 months, I thought I was the only one playing. Now, the board had flipped. The king was back in the game, and he knew exactly how the queen moved. The morning after Caleb's midnight visit to my room, the atmosphere shifted entirely. He didn't show up in a ridiculous hoodie. He didn't hide behind dark glasses. The enigma returned to Prescott in all his arrogant, terrifying glory, wearing a tailored black overcoat that made him look like royalty. And he didn't avoid me. He hunted me. The healing circle officially disbanded that afternoon. I sent a brief, cold email claiming the group had served its purpose, completely ignoring the frantic replies from Sarah and the others. I didn't care. I had bigger problems. My first problem cornered me in the dusty, labyrinthine aisles of the Prescott Library archives on Tuesday. I was reaching for a heavy textbook on the top shelf when a large, warm chest pressed flush against my back. An arm reached over my shoulder, plucking the book easily from the shelf. Looking for this, Pierce, Caleb's deep voice vibrated right against my ear, sending a treacherous shiver down my spine. I spun around, finding myself trapped between the towering bookshelf and his massive frame. He was so close I could see the faint stubble on his jaw and the wicked, predatory gleam in his stormy eyes. He wasn't wearing scent blockers anymore. His natural pheromones, rich cedar and sun-baked warmth, poured off him in waves, specifically designed to wrap around me and choke my senses. "Back off, Sterling," I hissed, pushing my hands flat against his chest. It was like pushing against a brick wall. "Make me," he challenged smoothly, leaning in a fraction closer. His gaze dropped to my mouth, then flicked back up, burning with a hunger he no longer bothered to hide. "You wanted my attention, Julian," you hacked lied, "and manipulated your way into getting it. Well, congratulations. You have all of it now." "You think this scares me?" I shot back, lifting my chin to glare at him, refusing to let him see how violently my pulse was racing. "I broke you once. I can do it again." Caleb laughed, a low, breathless sound that made my omega instincts purr in absolute submission, even as my rational mind screamed. "I'd love to see you try," he whispered, his thumb lightly brushing the silver hoop in my ear, sending a jolt of electricity straight to my core. "The alumni gala is this Friday. Let's make a new bet, you and me. No lies. No fake names, just us." I narrowed my eyes. "What kind of bet?" "A game of endurance," he murmured, his breath hot against my neck. "Whoever breaks first, whoever admits they're dying for the other person and begs for it, loses. And the loser has to get down on their knees in front of the entire gala and confess." My breath hitched. It was social suicide. It was absolute madness. It was exactly the kind of twisted, high-stakes game that had drawn me to him in the first place. "You're going to look pathetic begging in your expensive tuxedo, Caleb," I spat out, a dark smirk pulling at the corners of my mouth. He stepped back, his eyes flashing with raw challenge. "We'll see about that, Julian. Wear something pretty for me." The rest of the week was a psychological war zone. It was a masterclass in mutually assured destruction. In advanced calculus, Caleb took the seat directly behind me, casually draping his legs on either side of my chair. Every time he shifted, his knee would accidentally brush against my thigh, sending heat rushing straight to my face. I retaliated by intentionally wearing a slightly sheer, black silk button-down the next day, leaving the top 3 buttons undone to expose my collarbones and the geometric tattoo on my wrist. I made sure to stretch languidly across the table in the cafeteria, exactly in his line of sight. I saw the muscle in his jaw feather as he gripped his coffee cup hard enough to crack the ceramic. We were circling each other, bleeding out from the sheer effort of not giving in. Every brush of shoulders in the hall, every heated glare across a crowded room, was laced with months of repressed desire and toxic pride. We were 2 red flags snapping violently in a hurricane. By Friday night, my nerves were frayed to the breaking point. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my dorm room, staring at my reflection. I had chosen a slim, midnight blue velvet suit jacket with no shirt underneath, leaving a tantalizing strip of bare chest exposed. The platinum hair was styled impeccably, the silver hoop catching the light. But as I reached for the harsh, synthetic vape-scented cologne I had been using as armor, I stopped. The game was no longer about hiding. It was about seeing who was stronger. Slowly, I put the cheap bottle down. Instead, I let my natural pheromones rise to the surface for the first time in months. The soft, intoxicating scent of night blooming, jasmine and old paper filled the room. It was vulnerable, yes, but it was also a weapon. Let him choke on the scent he had missed so much. The Prescott Alumni Gala was held in the grand ballroom of the Sterling estate, a blatant display of Caleb's family wealth. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the vaulted ceilings, and a string quartet played softly over the hum of the wealthy elite. I walked through the towering oak doors, immediately commanding the attention of the room. Heads turned. Alpha stopped mid-sentence, their nostrils flaring as my untainted jasmine scent cut through the heavy air of expensive perfumes. But I wasn't looking at them. Across the ballroom, standing near the grand staircase with a glass of champagne in his hand, was Caleb. He was wearing a perfectly tailored classic black tuxedo that made him look devastatingly powerful. The moment I stepped into the room, his head snapped toward me. I saw his eyes darken to pitch black as the scent of jasmine reached him across the crowded floor. The glass in his hand trembled slightly. He handed the drink to a passing waiter and began walking toward me, his strides long and deliberate, parting the sea of Prescott's elite like Moses parting the Red Sea. I stood my ground, my heart hammering a frantic, deafening rhythm against my ribs. He stopped inches from me. The air between us instantly thickened, heavy with cedar, sunflowers, and jasmine. "You didn't wear a shirt," he stated, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that barely masked his desperation. "And you're already sweating sterling." I fired back, holding his intense gaze with a defiant smirk. "Ready to forfeit?" "Not a chance in hell," he whispered, offering his hand. "Dance with me, Pierce." I looked at his outstretched hand. The entire ballroom was watching us. The quiet Omega nerd and the untouchable Enigma, both transformed into monsters of their own making. I placed my hand in his. The moment our skin touched, a spark ignited that threatened to burn the entire estate to the ground. "Lead the way," I challenged softly. The war had officially reached its climax. The string quartet transitioned into a slow, haunting waltz just as Caleb pulled me onto the marble dance floor. The center of the Sterling Estate's grand ballroom felt like the eye of a hurricane, silent, suffocating, and entirely focused on us. He rested one large hand on the bare skin of my lower back, right where the velvet jacket ended. The heat of his palm seared through me like a brand. I placed my hand on his broad shoulder, feeling the rigid tension in his muscles beneath the expensive tuxedo. "You're shaking, Julian," he murmured, pulling me a fraction of an inch closer as we began to move. His cedar scent was overwhelming, battling the heavy wave of my jasmine pheromones for dominance in the space between us. "I'm shivering," I corrected, keeping my voice cool, though my pulse was hammering against my throat. "Your house is cold, Sterling." "Liar," he countered softly, his dark eyes tracing the exposed line of my chest, lingering on the geometric tattoo on my wrist before snapping back to my face. "You smell like a field of jasmine, Julian. It's making every alpha in this room lose their minds." He leaned, his lips brushing the shell of my ear. "But they know your mind. They know not to touch." "I don't belong to anyone," I hissed, tightening my grip on his shoulder, trying to ignore the dangerous flutter in my stomach. "Are you going to beg yet? Or do we need to dance until midnight?" "I could dance with you until the world ends," he replied smoothly, though the strain in his voice betrayed him. The bet was tearing us both apart. We were standing on the absolute edge of the precipice, daring each other to jump first. I looked up into his eyes, ready to deliver a cutting remark that would finally push him over the edge. But before I could speak, a harsh screech of feedback tore through the elegant music. The string quartet stopped abruptly. The low hum of conversations died. I turned my head. Standing on the grand staircase, gripping a microphone he had clearly snatched from the band, was Blake. He looked disheveled, his tie askew and his face flushed with alcohol and vindictive rage. The crowd murmured in confusion, but Blake ignored them, his bloodshot eyes scanning the room until they locked onto Caleb and me. "Well, well, well," Blake's amplified voice echoed off the crystal chandeliers. "If it isn't the happy couple. Or should I say, the two biggest frauds in Prescott University history." Caleb's grip on my waist tightened instantly, his relaxed, predatory posture vanished, replaced by a rigid, terrifying stillness. "Blake, put the mic down," Caleb ordered, his voice carrying effortlessly across the silent ballroom. It was an Enigma's command, laced with a heavy dose of warning pheromones. But Blake was too drunk and too angry to care. "Why?" "Because you don't want your precious guests to know the truth," he sneered, staggering slightly as he pointed a finger down at us. "Did you know, ladies and gentlemen, that the great Caleb Sterling's tragic heartbreak was nothing but a cheap fraternity dare?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. I felt the color drain from my face. "Oh, but wait, it gets better," Blake laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Because the poor, innocent Omega he broke, Julian Pierce, he's not a victim at all. He's a manipulative little snake." My heart stopped. "He hacked my phone," Blake shouted, his voice cracking with hysteria. "He manipulated the group chat. He manipulated me into making the bet. Julian Pierce orchestrated the entire thing just to trap the sterling heir. He played all of us. The silence that followed was deafening. Every single eye in the ballroom turned to me. The judgment, the shock, the disgust, it was palpable. This was it. This was the public ruin I had feared. The game was over, and I had lost everything. I instinctively tried to step back, to hide, to run. But Caleb didn't let go. Instead of stepping away from me, he stepped in front of me. "Are you finished, Blake?" Caleb's voice was dangerously calm. He didn't yell. He didn't panic. He stood there with the absolute authority of a king defending his territory. Blake blinked, confused by the lack of outrage. "I just told everyone he played you, Caleb. He's a liar." "I know," Caleb said, his voice cold and steady. "I've known for a week, and I don't care." The crowd gasped again. Even I stared at the back of Caleb's head in stunned silence. "What I do care about," Caleb continued, taking a slow, menacing step toward the staircase, "is that you're standing in my house, interrupting my dance, and insulting my partner." My partner, the words hit me like a physical blow. "Hey, he ruined us," Blake stammered, the alcohol-fueled courage beginning to crack under the weight of Caleb's pure, concentrated alpha rage. "No, Blake," I finally spoke up. My voice shook slightly at first, but as I stepped out from behind Caleb, a sudden, cold clarity washed over me. The war between Caleb and me was ours alone. I wasn't going to let this pathetic frat boy end it. I reached into the inner pocket of my velvet jacket and pulled out my phone. "I hacked your phone, yes," I said, my voice echoing clearly without a microphone. "Which means I still have access to the backup files you thought you deleted. Files detailing the embezzlement of the fraternity funds you've been siphoning to pay off your gambling debts." Blake's face went paper white. The microphone in his hand trembled. "I have the bank transfers, Blake. I have the messages." I lied smoothly, though my bluff was impeccable. "If you don't put that microphone down and walk out of this estate right now, I will email those files to the dean and the police before you reach the front door." Blake looked from me to Caleb, who was standing beside me with a look of terrifying, proud satisfaction. We were no longer fighting each other. We had seamlessly, effortlessly clicked into place as a united front, two master manipulators tearing down a common enemy. Blake dropped the microphone. It hit the marble stairs with a loud thud. Without another word, he turned and fled down the hallway, the heavy oak door slamming shut behind him. The ballroom was dead silent. The crisis had been averted, but the tension was thick enough to choke on. I let out a shaky breath, my hands trembling slightly as the adrenaline began to fade. The pure, unadulterated scent of my jasmine flooded the space around us, completely masking any remaining trace of stress. Caleb turned to me. The anger in his eyes was gone, replaced by something so raw and overwhelming it made my chest ache. He didn't care about the crowd. He didn't care about the whispers that were just beginning to start again. He reached out, his hand gently wrapping around my wrist, right over the geometric tattoo. "You didn't need to do that," I whispered, my voice thick. "You could have let him ruin me. I'd burn this entire estate down before I let anyone touch you," he replied, his voice rough and stripped of all pretense. He pulled on my wrist, dragging me away from the center of the room, past the stunned guests, and toward the dark, quiet corridor leading away from the ballroom. The bet was forgotten. The game was over. There was only the brutal, inevitable truth left waiting for us in the dark. The heavy oak doors of the ballroom slammed shut behind us, instantly cutting off the murmurs of the Prescott elite and the soft strains of the string quartet. The dimly lit, wood-panel corridor was freezing, but I couldn't feel the chill. My blood was running too hot, entirely consumed by the searing grip Caleb had on my wrist. He didn't stop walking until we reached the darkest corner of the hallway, a small alcove hidden from the main estate. Caleb spun around and pushed me back. It wasn't rough, but it was absolute. My back hit the cool mahogany wall, and before I could even catch my breath, he had caged me in. He planted both hands on the wall beside my head, leaning in so close that his chest brushed against my bare skin. The silence between us was heavier than any words we had spoken on the dance floor. The war of the red flags was over. The adrenaline of taking down Blake was fading, leaving nothing but the raw, exposed nerves of two liars who had run out of places to hide. His chest heaved, his stormy eyes searching my face with a desperate, frantic intensity. The intoxicating scent of dark cedar and sunflowers crashed over me, completely unguarded. "The bet is over," Caleb breathed, his voice a gravelly whisper. "Who won?" I asked, though my voice trembled, betraying the confident smirk I tried to force onto my lips. "We both lost," he said, shaking his head. He brought one hand up, his long fingers carefully brushing a stray lock of platinum hair away from my eyes. I'm done playing Julian. I'm done pretending I want anything else but you. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly tight. I manipulated you, Caleb. I hacked a phone just to force you to look at me. I'm not the innocent, sweet Omega you thought I was. Thank God for that. He let out a breathless, broken laugh, resting his forehead against mine. Do you think I care about how it started, Julian? You think you trapped me, but I walked into that snare with my eyes wide open. The second I sat next to you in the library months ago, the second you looked up at me through those thick glasses, I was already yours. The dare was just the pathetic excuse I used to justify why I couldn't stay away from you. Tears, hot and unbidden, pricked the corners of my eyes. The platinum-haired bad boy facade, the armor I had painstakingly built over the last 3 months, cracked and shattered into a million pieces. I hated being invisible. I whispered, my voice breaking completely as a single tear escaped, sliding down my cheek. I hated that I thought I wasn't enough for you. I changed everything, my hair, my clothes, my scent, because I thought you threw me away because I was just a nobody. You were never a nobody, Caleb murmured fiercely, his thumbs gently wiping the tear away. You were my everything, and I was too much of a coward to admit it. I am so sorry, Julian. I am so damn sorry. He didn't ask for permission this time. He didn't need to. Caleb crashed his lips against mine, and the world simply ceased to exist. It wasn't like the cold, calculated kiss on the graduation stage. This was a collision of souls. It was desperate, hungry, and entirely real. I opened my mouth for him, my hands instinctively flying up to fist in the lapels of his tuxedo, pulling him impossibly closer. He groaned into my mouth, his arms wrapping tightly around my waist, lifting me slightly off the floor. I tasted his regret, his longing, and his absolute devotion. The ghost of that traumatic graduation kiss was completely burned away, replaced by a fire that threatened to consume us both. My natural jasmine scent exploded in the narrow corridor, wrapping around his cedar pheromones in a perfect, biological symphony. Mate, my instincts purred, finally. Caleb broke the kiss, both of us gasping for air. His eyes were pitch black, completely dilated with alpha possession. He trailed his lips down my jaw, stopping right over my scent gland, where my pulse was beating frantically against my neck. Mine, he growled softly against my skin. Yours, I gasped, tilting my head back, offering myself entirely to the monster I had created, the monster I loved. His teeth sank into the tender flesh of my neck. A sharp, brilliant sting pierced my skin, followed instantly by a rush of golden, intoxicating warmth. The bond snapped into place like a heavy lock clicking shut. A profound sense of peace, of belonging flooded my veins. I clung to his broad shoulders as he claimed me, marking me as his equal, his partner in every chaotic sense of the word. The next morning, the winter sun over Boston was blindingly bright, reflecting off the pristine snow covering the Prescott University quad. I walked up the main steps of the engineering building, a steaming black Americano in my hand. I wasn't wearing a cheap hoodie, but I wasn't wearing an intimidating leather jacket either, just a soft, oversized cashmere sweater that Caleb had insisted I borrow, perfectly slipping off one shoulder to display the fresh, bruised bite mark on my neck. The heavy doors opened, and Caleb stepped out. He was in his usual dark overcoat, looking every bit the untouchable enigma. But the moment his eyes found mine, the coldness vanished. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that belonged exclusively to me. He walked down the steps, wrapping an arm securely around my waist, pulling me into a soft, lingering kiss right in the middle of the crowded quad. Gasps and whispers erupted around us, but neither of us cared. The game was over. The predator had been caught by the prey, and the prey had willingly handed over the key to the cage. Later that afternoon, a notification popped up on the campus registry board. The basement club known as the Prescott Healing Circle had officially been disbanded. In its place, a new, highly exclusive student group had been registered by a terrified freshman named Sarah. Its title, The Prescott Survival Guide: How to Avoid the Demon Couple. I leaned against Caleb's chest as we read the notification on my phone, laughing until my sides hurt. He pressed a kiss to the top of my platinum hair, his cedar scent wrapping around me like a shield. They were right to be afraid. We were toxic, we were manipulative, and we were absolutely, irrevocably in love.